Order matters.
We'll get to that last.
Cool.
We'll start out easy. All right, we're live. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
We have Suze here for once,
Woo woo.
thanks to the quarantine. So we have quite a bit of things that popped up this week. Oh, we're echoing pretty bad, by the way. Maybe I should need to talk quieter.
Turning.
Echo. Yeah, it's pretty bad. While we're waiting, we have quite a few things that popped up in the Discord channel this week, of things that people wanted to know or were curious about. Just as an overview, we're going to talk about documenting code in one of Zach and I's favorite books, Clean Code. Actually, I should add that to make it easier to find. We're going to talk about APIs, what they are, how to use them, some common why you should use them when you're getting started. Design system updates from Susie about the oneleif website design system. We'll actually make that guy first. Tips, and then due to the current circumstances, we wanted to have some tips for how to work efficiently at home, how to remain calm in a time of uncertainty, and then our fun topic will be talking about Zach's Swift UI kit. Or Swift UI in general, sorry. But Zach's Swift UI kit is a good case study. Are you guys still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you just muted yourself. Got it.
Yep.
Suze, you want to start with design system updates?
Yeah. Okay. So our design team for the OneLeaf website has started to use Notion. And so far we have like tasked out different parts of the design system for all our designers to work on. Yeah, that's that. Personally, I've been working on the branding strategy for us, but this design system would be helpful because then we have clearly like, oh, these are our specific colors, this is our typography. So it'll be a helpful thing for we'll need in the future.
You put this topic on the stream notes. Anything else you want to talk about? Did we want to go through any of it, or?
What do you mean? No, like it's fine. Like there's just like there's items there, like the brand strategy, that's kind of what I've been working on. So that's like coming up with like the purpose and vision, mission, like it says, these very core items of our company. That's kind of what branding strategy encompasses. System is more just like UI stuff. Yeah, that's all.
Got it. Okay. So next we'll get into the maybe we save the technically heavy stuff for later on. So we can go with the tips for how to remain or work efficiently at home and how to remain calm in times of uncertainty.
Do we want to do any like updates or that stuff? Kind of.
Yeah. So based on the announcements last week, it's gonna be a lot of reiterating. We haven't had anything new this week in particular. We're getting much closer to V1, version 1 of the OneLeaf website being done. We're probably a week or two away from all the designs being done, and then a week or two after that for all the developers to implement them, because it's all static content, so it shouldn't take very long to develop. As far as OneSwag goes, we've made a decision on who we're going with. I've set up the account, and I just need to steal Sue's and finish setting it up, because they don't have the exact color of green that we were using before, so we'll have to rethink how we're going to work that. But it is much cheaper than the other company we were going to use, which is nice. We had some updates. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to the announcements channel, making sure I'm not missing anything. We had updates on the mentorship channel. The role for being a mentor just basically says that people can reach out to you whenever, and it makes it easier for you to distinguish yourself as a mentor. Also gets you access to the cool mentor party bus channel. So this this stream was supposed to be a meetup. We usually do meetup on third Thursdays of every month. However, due to coronavirus and the CDC and whatnot saying limit gatherings to under 10 people. Not that we were going to have 10 people. The meetup was pretty small, but we still wanted to be safe and not put anybody in harm's way. So while you're stuck at home, it can be great to get things done. It can also be hard on your mental health. So we wanted to basically give some um, information on how to A, get things done, and B, not sacrifice your mental health for that productivity. Zach, anything to add? Suze?
No, I think you led great into that. Do you want to start off with the tips, or I mean, we
Sure.
can.
I didn't write any out. I figured this is going to be more of a discussion.
That's
Oh,
what we figured too, kind of.
oh yeah. I had a few tips off the top of my head
I
that
yeah, I have
Susie and I have been doing.
yeah, go for it. I have a few as well. I just didn't write them down.
So a few of them that we've been doing are just walks, getting outside, of course.
Yeah.
That's been like I think one of the main things. Susie's been doing some workouts before.
Before work, yeah. I've created like I think what helps me at least is having a set kind of schedule or giving myself a routine to fall into. Because working from home all the time, I worked from home, but not like for this much. So having a routine to fall into is very helpful for um, just like knowing what to expect day by day. And those walks have been really helpful. Outside isn't banned. Um, so it's good to be outdoors, get some vitamin D, but
Unless you're under a
fresh
tornado
air.
warning like we are.
Yeah, that's true. Some people, which is crazy. But no, I've been working out. I'm already an active person, so hearing that like my gym's closed and can't dance, my studio's closed, really that was tough for me. But luckily there's YouTube resources, even like Instagram. Some of my favorite dancers have been posting these live streams of them just giving a class, which is awesome. Um, but there's a whole bunch of resources for working out at home, and if you've already been an active person, or even if you haven't, being active just moderately is really helpful for the body, but also the mind. So
Yeah. And the
Something I
last tip that I have is to just reach out to people. We use Slack a lot of work, but still just reaching out to just talk to people. I mean, I would always do
helps keep
that.
you sane.
Yeah, I would do
yeah.
that if they're side by side at work, and I would just tap their shoulder and say, chat up a little conversation, so that you can still type those out and
Mhm.
get that out. And it's always good to voice chat. But yeah, those are our few tips and kind of that.
You know,
Keeping up with. Oh,
that's a good
sorry.
idea, Zach. We should set up some like I don't know lunchtime voice chats. Just say if anybody wants to hop in and chit chat.
Yeah,
Take a
That
yeah,
would be
break.
no,
good. I feel like communication's a really big key because, like, when you're working from home, it's like, oh, I'm like on this desolate island where I have work to do. But really communicating with your team members is so helpful to keep that, I don't want to say illusion, but keep that idea in the back of your head that, yes, these are real people that I work with and that I'm coworkers with and all that.
To add to your point about walks, Susie, I at work at my old job, I wasn't I wasn't very happy at work, so I took walks like once every hour and a half. But at my new job, I like it a lot more, so I probably take walks, like maybe twice a day. And
Yeah, I love taking walks at work.
I've come to find that be- because I enjoyed it, almost makes it like harder on my body. Like my back will hurt more at the end of the day. So I had to set myself a timer for every 2 hours to go take a walk. Otherwise, I'd be like so dived into work that the time would just go by. So yeah, make sure to set yourself a timer. It'll really help. And while you feel like it's pulling you away from your work, I think it almost makes me work more efficient overall. And the only time I would uh, caution against that is kind of like the analogy that I can think of off the top of my head would be like reading a book. Make sure you finish the chapter of whatever you're doing before you stop because it can be harder to put yourself back in that space. But if that chapter is going to take you 8 hours, maybe don't finish that.
That's a good analogy. And another thing with your back hurting and that kind of issue is, I know when I was working in office, I had a standing desk, so I feel like that alleviated any sort of like, for me, it's my hips, any sort of pain, just because you're standing up straight and stuff. But at home, you might not have that option.
I put a
But
bunch of
also
books
the
under my monitors.
Oh, that's smart. But also the importance of ergonomic, is that how you pronounce it?
Ergonomic.
Ergonomic seating and standing and stuff.
Basically, you
Like,
want to make sure that your elbows are relaxed all the way down and your arms are at 90 degrees. Any more than that, you'll start hurting your wrists and hands. So some tips on the developer side for work.
exactly.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
so some
Because
tips
I
for.
feel at home.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I feel like at home I have a tendency to like sit kind of funny on chairs
Yep,
just
me
because
too.
it's like casual. But that's just something to keep in mind.
That and the chairs they get in offices are usually way better than the ones you get at home. Like I have a gaming chair, and I regret getting it. It was not worth it. I should have gotten just a normal office chair because they're way better on your back. So I found myself having awful posture throughout the day. But that those 2 hour breaks where I like take a walk, I like like move my shoulders around. It's like oh I was sitting poorly, and then when I go sit back down the first hour or so that I'm sitting down, I like hold good posture because I was aware of it after the walk. Um, so some tips for developers. I actually learned this today. If you go, lots of companies are having you. You can do your work from like your home computer, but a lot of people are having you remote in. So if you're doing RDP or a remote desktop connection where you're basically remoting into your computer at work, um, under display you can choose to use both your monitors if you have two at home, which is super nice. So that way you get the 2 monitor experience, which can help you be a lot more efficient. Um, any others, guys?
That's what you
Snacks.
D-
Snacks are really good. Breathing,
say.
yeah, breathing in general is pretty good as a human. Yeah, it's good for you.
It's
taking
nice.
some time to just breathe and kind of reflect on what you're doing. And also for me, like kind of writing down goals or like little things that I want to accomplish day to day or in the week, and that really helps with kind of the swarm of everything you have to do without no one around you.
Just in general, I feel like I write down a lot. So, and at the end of the day, I always have like end of day, and then I like write down what I did and what I need to do tomorrow. That way, I don't forget it. So, totally agree with that.
Sorry, I'm gonna write down a little synopsis of what we talked about in case people hop in the chat or the stream late. Okay, so the tips for working efficiently at home. While you can remain productive at home, um, if you have a family member that's affected by this, or for example, my best friend can't have his wedding on the date that he planned because of the coronavirus, and like I wasn't supposed to be here for the next stream. So like make sure you're there for people around you because this is a really hard time for people. I have several friends who've gotten laid off, who don't know if they're going to be able to get a job because the market's so bad. Or I have a buddy who was going to be a tattoo artist, but all their clients canceled. Now he couldn't get his job. Um, so yeah, this is a really important time to make sure you check in on your friends. If your friends are introverts, make sure you're the one that reaches out because odds that they do are not very high. Um, let's keep the. This might be a really good time for you to be active in the daily progress channel because if you're struggling to have a routine down, if you say you're going to do something, it helps us hold you more accountable. If you when you come into the daily progress on day 2 of doing it and you don't get accomplished what you said you're going to do yesterday, you're probably going to feel bad about it. And that's a good thing because it's going to make you want to get more done. I hope. Don't beat yourself up about it. It's not a huge deal, but hopefully it will push you to get more done. So if I had to put these into like notes, I'd say staying productive is really big. Keep in contact with people. Um, checking in on like your close friends and whatnot. Um, and for working efficiently at home, walks, taking breaks, snacks, those all help. Um, Anything else you guys want to add? I feel like I'm rambling.
I would say for remaining calm, one of the things that's like helped me is the mindset that, okay, no one knows what's gonna happen. So it's like I shouldn't worry about what is gonna happen because it's like no one knows.
Yeah, kind of take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah. And then I've also meditated the past couple of days and that helps me too. Like, if I happen to be stressed out about something, just lie yourself down and force yourself to breathe. There are self-guided meditation videos on YouTube. Any of those are probably fine. I don't feel like the need of like mentioning one because I literally just you can search it.
I had
Um,
Sorry to interrupt. I had a cool realization last week. I had a friend that was really struggling to sleep due to the uncertainty about their job and whatnot with the coronavirus epidemic. Um, and they were having like panic attacks at night. And we started, they were doing good about eating good and having a good sleep and a good routine and whatnot. But sometimes that's just not quite enough. So what I did recommend is just like Susie said, meditation, and just saying to meditate. 99% of people just imagine, like a Buddhist monk sitting with their hands on their knees, just like staring or with their eyes closed, breathing. Right? Um, we forgot to do meditation at the beginning of this, but the point that I was going to make is that if you've ever been to a hypnotist or seen a hypnotist show, the realization that I had is meditation is almost self-inflicted hypnotism. I don't personally believe in hypnotism, but um, when I did go, they would say, close your eyes, start from your toes, relax your toe muscles, relax your ankle muscles, relax your calves, and kind of work your way all the way up. And you'll find that is very similar to meditation because when you just put your mind at ease and just let it kind of float, you'll kind of realize like your posture's bad or you're tensing some muscle that you don't need to. Um, and so just kind of taking a second and like thinking about nothing will help your body think about what it should be thinking about, itself mainly, or yourself mainly. So I can't recommend meditation enough. And if you are one of the people that hasn't had any experience with meditation or any training, The Mind Illuminated is a good book. Otherwise, ask one of us. Um, and I wouldn't say I would hypnotize you, but I would happily like be a calm voice to talk you through how it works in a voice chat or something, because it can be really hard to do it for the first time until like you've kind of like had that aha moment. This is how it works. Sorry, I talked for a while. I assume y'all are muted.
yeah, we're here.
Okay, just making sure. See if you had anything to add.
I would say for me with meditation, it's just like how I get into it would be focusing on my breath and slowing it down. Um, but interesting perspective on that. I've never heard it being compared to hypnotist stuff.
Yeah, that is 99.9% of the time the way I do it as well. Is I just start breathing and then the hypnotism relaxing your muscles type thing kind of comes into play on its own. Um, but like if you're trying to sleep or whatever, it's a good method to like relax all your muscles, or do the exact opposite and clench all your muscles for like 10 seconds, and then your body will be just tired enough that it'll kind of put you in a different headspace or make you more tired. But yeah, really just counting into five, counting up to five, and then counting back down as you're breathing in and out is a really good way of just clearing your head. Any other tips for remaining calm in a time of uncertainty?
Um, no, I think it's good. Yeah, just keeping in communication with people.
Yes, self isolation can really take a toll. Hope somebody added me 1 sec. Yeah, Johnny said the breathing app on his Apple Watch is his go to for meditation or taking a breather. Yeah, I I started out using that a lot when I first got my watch, and I guess I almost came to find it more as a nuisance. I don't like. I don't know. It's more of a personal thing, I guess. Because it usually is like, oh, you need to breathe. I don't know. I am assuming it like tracks your heart rate or something, and it's like, oh, you're kind of stressed. You should take a breath. And that's always at the one point in time where it's like, no, I need to get like whatever I'm doing done, and then I'll come back and do it afterwards. But maybe I should give it a try of doing it when it tells me to.
Yeah, you probably should.
All right, well, onto our technical topics. Unless you guys have anything else you want to chit chat about, let me check the stream chat real quick, make sure nobody has anything else. Nope, we're good to go. Okay, so we had, I believe Cosmin was asking about documenting your code. So there's a few ways you can do this. First of all, I'd recommend reading Clean Code by Robert Martin. I believe there's a free PDF out there on it. I'm not sure the legality of it or whatnot. I just want to pull up the table of contents. Okay, so clean code comprises of a lot of things. So meaningful names, naming your variables well. Sorry, preface. I dove into this too quick. Having clean code reduces the necessary amount of documentation. It won't make it unnecessary because if I'm a new developer, documentation will still help me. Or if you add the summaries in a lot of languages, like if you hover over the name of a function, if you add like some sort of documentation tag above the function, when you hover over the function in an IDE, it'll tell you what that function does, whatever you wrote in that summary. Um, so having clean code won't negate the necessity of documentation, but it should remove the necessity for a lot of random comments. Like if you have some super complicated function and you break it out into 3 functions with really good names, you no longer have to document this giant function. You just had to break it out and refactor it and make it look good. Um, so the basic concepts are name your variables well. Don't do what like C did when they're limited on space. And if you name a string str, no, just name it string or button string or whatever the full name of the thing is. So that way when people come back and read it, they understand what in the world's going on. They don't have to take a stab at whatever the acronym means. Following solid is a good idea. So don't single responsibility principle. Each one of your functions, each one of your classes should only do one thing. It helps keep you from getting too bloated, too massive. We could Zach, we could probably honestly have a whole stream on solid and other design principles or design patterns.
Yeah, we could have many streams on that.
Yep.
But just general overall clean code, it's more of a few basic things that you can apply to multiple places. So like you said, good naming convention. Like I know naming's a big joke of like, oh, it's 60% code and 30% thinking of what to name a variable. Um, but that does help after a bit, and it's just after you write the code, you still need to read it and maintain it. So making sure it's maintainable and easy to read after you've done that said, however much time goes by, if it be, you work on it the next day or you work on a year from now, you still want it to be easy to come back and maintain.
Yep. Also, I think there's a large distinction between comments and documentation. Comments are a subset of documentation, and comments are there to support um, the readability of the code or the understanding of the code. Whereas documentation is kind of as a whole, maybe you add a wiki to getting started or installing. On your API, you say, when you log in, this is what's returned, here's the error codes, those type of things. Working with client-server models, documentation is almost necessary because usually one team works on the front end or one person works on the back end. They usually don't have a whole lot of overlap, as we've come to find in the OneLeaf website, unless you have somebody to kind of bridge the gap like I've done and Zach has done. So having that documentation makes it a lot easier, so they don't have to reach out to the backend developers, waste their time, and say, "Hey, what does this thing do again?" They can just go look at the documentation. Um, Let me check the channel and make sure we don't
Yeah,
have any other questions on it.
and Johnny's giving a good example too. At least I can speak for the iOS perspective of it, or like Swift. You can write comments uh, that are specified for documentation, and then there's tools that will generate the HTML documentation site based off of your comments on a function. So for Swift, it's specifically you can do 3 slashes, and then you can pretty much write in this markdown kind of style. And it's built in to Swift, and Xcode, but yeah, like Johnny's saying, you use Jazzy and some other thing to generate HTML, which you can kind of browse the document, the
So
documentation.
for the OneLeaf website, we use what's called Swagger. And Swagger is a really common API documentation framework. That's probably not the right name of it, but basically what you do is you can write a YAML file, which is just a markup language. And what that does is it generates a documentation website for you. So you can see for authentication, you have a user. To register a user, you have to have an email and a password. If you do it correctly, you get a 201 code. If you do it wrong, you get a 400 validation error, and so on and so on. These things are absolutely necessary in developing anything larger than a two-man team, because you don't want to have to keep you don't want to have to say, oh, I can't like do whatever I'm doing on the front end without this back end guy being there, and well, what happens if he's on vacation, so this is really huge for working on teams. And you don't have to manually do it all. You can have frameworks help you generate these things. Zach had a good example of it in Swift. We do have, hold on, Zach, I'm going to go to, I believe your Swift UI kit has quite a bit of documentation, doesn't it?
It has a bit some places.
Do 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 do. Sorry, I just wanted to give an example or two.
Yeah, no, the stream's
Eh,
a little behind, so I can't see what
no,
you're
you're fine.
looking at. But
I'm hopping onto your Swift UI kit.
um, I
Let's.
think it's gonna be in like extension or container or something in there. It's not really in the views because some views are
There
so
we go.
basic.
Okay, so you can see in this one, for example, he adds a little description of what a VStack is. So you have a description for the class, you have a header for the file. These headers are kind of a little obsolete. In olden days, people used to have like their version history up here. So you'd say, Zach created it on 1029, and then on 1030, I edited it, and then on 1031, Will edited it, and so on. These things are handled for you by Git nowadays, so they're kind of unnecessary. But it's still nice to have the accreditation of who made the file at the very least. So what is kind of standard now is having some sort of documentation for the class. So if I were to be looking at this in Xcode, I don't know if this is 100% the case, but if I were to hover over VStack, if I'm using it somewhere else, and I'm like, let's say this is built into like a package or something, and I don't have access to the actual source code. If you have, depending on the language, if you have a good documentation system built in, I could just hover over VStack and it would pop open with this guy, and it would say, "Oh, it's a vertical stack view." Oh, well, I wouldn't know what VStack is otherwise. Um, which may be a hint to change this to vertical stack instead of VStack. But anyway, so you can see also for the initializer, this is what creates it, and then it tells you the parameters. So if without having access to the source code, if I were to hover over instantiating a new VStack, it would list me out all these things. And like if I just saw width spacing, I may not 100% know what it does, but it would give you the description of what exactly it does. So usually what you do is you have something to explain what the function does, the parameters that it takes in, and what it returns. In this case, it doesn't return anything, so it's not a big deal. So this is a really good example of great documentation, and the format of the documentation can change. Like maybe there won't be dashes or whatever. In C# it would say like summary up at the top or something like that. I forget. But this is something that we um, do believe in heavily because it makes it easier if you're working on a team. If you're working on your own, it's still a good idea if this project is going to be public. That way, if you're applying for a job and one of the technical uh, interviewers goes and looks at your code, they can see, oh, he like actually took the time to do this well, wrote his code well, and had documentation, so I can understand what in the world he's even working on. Yeah, you're right, Johnny. VStack is from Apple. That's not Zach's mistake. Anyways, so that kind of covers my thoughts on documentation. Do you have anything else to say on it, Zach?
Um, just I guess like you were saying, documentation is really good to if you're looking through the source code and it's documented, and it's really nice. But the other case of it is to either generate documentation where they have the docs that you can go through and see if it's 100% documented, or you get the kind of browser experience. The other way is that Sabian was saying that if you're using an IDE or something that has like linting support or IntelliSense and can tell you a little bit more about the types that you're working with, they do actually generate and show a message of kind of what you said, the title of it, what it's used for, and then the parameters and a little bit more information. So it's really just making it easier for someone to interface or to use any of the functions that you've made. And Fardine is wondering why we're in a private chat. Should we move to?
Oh my god, I didn't realize we weren't in the. I'm sorry, Fardine. That's our bad. Yeah, we're gonna go hop in the oneleif work channel. We will give everybody a second to hop in here. Oh, Zach's calling me again. Yes. Oh, and you leave right as I join. Silly goose. You call me and then leave right as I get in? What in the world?
Discord crashed.
Discord on anything but Windows. Electron is a lie.
Yo, am I unmuted?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you now. Hi, Fardine. Hi, Johnny.
Hello.
Dude, yell at me way sooner about that in the future. I don't know.
No worries. I just got I had it in the background. I just got onto the video. I was on another call, so I hopped on and I was like, wait a second, where are they even chatting? Is there a magical hidden channel?
A private call, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, hold the phone real quick. Johnny, what is your picture? I love it.
Dude.
It's a dude?
No, that's fine.
Also, sorry for being absent this week. Oh my god, this week was crazy with my parents. They're abroad right now, and the whole situation.
Oh man, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, they've been trying to get earlier tickets, and my brother and I, we've been troubleshooting from this end. And they're in Asia right now, which is kind of like one of the big hubs for everything happening. So this week was just nuts trying to get them to come back.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. That sounds insane.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one of my buddies that's living in California, they just put out a shelter in place. I don't know what all it means, but basically it means don't leave your house. And their wedding was next week, so now they're trying to figure out how to live stream it. So I've been trying to work with them so that they could have some sort of way of reliably streaming their wedding, so everybody could watch it.
Jeez, that's so unfortunate. Yeah, no, it's insane. Even here, Ontario just recently declared a state of emergency, and once again, my brother and I, we were just rushing out to get as many groceries as we can, just because everyone's stocking up on everything. So you literally walk into the grocery store, everything's just ransacked, and forget the toilet paper. People are taking waffles, bread.
Not the waffles.
Honestly, the only thing being left behind is either vegan food, vegan snacks and stuff, or sugar-free things. It's the craziest. It's the craziest thing ever, and I don't blame a lot of the people. Hysteria definitely has a way of taking people over, but this week's just been hectic. So yeah, long story short, sorry for being away, and I'm trying to catch up in real time and watch the previous design lead video, and now I'm on the stream.
Alrighty, so we were in the middle of talking about documentation. This is a good idea. While we're talking about documentation, on the design side of things, Susie's here, by the way, Fardine.
Hello, Susie.
Yo, we've been on mute.
Yeah.
Reacting to everything.
They have an echo pretty bad, so they stay on mute.
Somebody loves to.
I don't get my headphones, so we echo.
So yeah, documentation on the design side of things. The only thing that I'm personally aware of is a design system, and I still kind of know what that means.
Yes.
Basically, keep track of your tasks, have some sort of wiki to say how to get onboarded on the project, keep track of here's the average spacing that you have for things. Is the whole site left aligned, center aligned, those type of things. I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, sure. Well, I haven't been as proactive on it. again, once again, this week's been crazy, but hopefully soon I can touch base with people and then see the progress that they've made. But yes, so long story short, with that, design systems are essentially a way um, to categorize the design decisions and the design assets that are being used in an organization across their product ecosystem, or even just their general ecosystem. It does differ from um, marketing assets and then marketing, like design on the marketing side. That's where brand comes in a bit, and brand strategy and brand systems. Some people like to categorize that as a subset of a design system. Other organizations, they like to separate them. It depends really on how their departments function, whether it's in a matrix or functionally separate. But yes, it's essentially a wiki to guide your team on principles that you agree on together, whether it's consistency, simplicity, and host all the components that you would be using as a team. Um, there are other pieces of documentation in a project on the design side that aren't as commonly known about or aren't as formalized, I should say. There are things that some uh, teams do differently. For example, I've seen some teams use assumption logs. So since design is very heavy on hypothesis formation and testing, there's a lot of assumptions that are made, which are then passed on to the developers to carry out as changes to the code. Um, Teams that use assumption logs basically have a long list of these assumptions, and they've fleshed out the hypothesis from the why behind it to the results that they expect, like in a very scientific way. Um,
This is kind of making a little bit more sense. Okay, this the weird segue here, but it's making a lot more sense why companies are so apt to switching to agile, because it makes it much easier for them to be more adaptive in these type of things. And I didn't realize how the design side of things would affect it so much.
Yeah, no, and because of the rapidly changing nature of a product cycle and the pace of things that get done, you need to be able to form these hypotheses, test them, bring them back to the table, see what works, what doesn't work, and then revisit them again and further improve and iterate and evolve over time, which is very in tune with agile. Um, and there have been numerous studies done on the depth of design having an effect on the resources and the progress of the project later. Like there's a lot of conversions out there, but I think for every dollar that is spent on design, you save roughly like I think it's uh, $100 in development and $1,000 or like something like that. There's a ratio to it. Um, for how many dollars you do save, the more you spend on design because you are testing the assumptions beforehand and documenting your process instead of getting into a situation later where you don't have the documentation or don't have that process. So that's the assumption log. There's other pieces of documentation that a team might use. There's the change request database. So if a design team might implement a task board or a database for change requests. So if they are doing design reviews or design audits, they might revisit the product and do a retrospective inspection, and they might submit change requests to tweak minor things or even major things. And that is documentation in itself too. So it's very inherent in design. And Susie, feel free to jump in about your workspace too. I don't know how I don't know how to do it there, but from my experience, design is almost synonymous with documentation.
Interesting.
It's
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it's a matter of how formal some designers are. I know there's a lot of designers that like to do things ad hoc, and they're very good at what they do, and that's where their creativity shines. But it really depends from the designer's end and the organization that's hosting them.
Yeah, I don't know if this was touched on at all, but another part of design documentation that people might not know about would be the like how we set up a test, like the usability test or onboarding a new designer. So
Mm-hmm.
any of that documentation or like audit information. there might be documentations of, oh, this is how my company does this. I don't think you brought that up, but that's just another part of it.
Hmm.
It's interesting because design, yeah, there's a lot of documentation, but also another part of design is because technology constantly updates and software constantly updates. Another part of design is, okay, creatively thinking, okay, here's my new standard for material or iOS or whatever. How do I make our style as a company match that? So that might not be within documentation, but it's another part of design's role.
I feel like we're slowly
Um,
turning the stream into a podcast here.
uh, maybe I mean that's the sense that I've got from it, but I think it's good in a way that it's not a podcast. I think it's a really cool concept to have it as a YouTube live stream.
So, Susie, you were talking about the topic of like when a new design space like Material or iOS comes out. I'm curious, how would like okay, so let's say you've been doing iOS, forever, and then all of a sudden your company says, "All right, we're gonna start doing augmented reality." How would you even like wrap your brain around like a whole new way of designing things, or like a whole new like it's just completely different from everything else, I guess, because it's 3D.
Oh, so I mean, if you're viewing the augmented reality on an iPhone or on an iOS device, like they
Or
already have
or a
that.
headset. I guess it was more of an in general question. Sorry.
Um, they'd probably hire out designers that have 3D experience as well, just to fill that gap between 2D and 3D. Because there's designers that specialize in all sorts of different products.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I might be more mobile based, someone else has specialties in something else.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, no, I second what Susie said. There's different specializations. It might also be a matter of looking at best practices and what's done. So typically, if Apple or Google or if some big company was rolling an ecosystem out like that, they would have a set of principles or guidelines for other organizations to follow. For example, with Android, there was Material. With any of Apple's developmental ecosystems, they had the guidelines to follow too. I forget what the name is for their design system. But it gives a north star for other organizations to base their design off of. Not that they have to follow it to a T. There are some rules that are tweakable, but usually with stuff like that, they'll give you a helping hand because they want designers and developers to have an easy time making things for that platform.
Because I'm a curious fellow, I posted a link in. Oh, that was iOS. Whoops. You know what's funny? We had absolutely nothing on UXD channel until I don't know a month ago, and I feel like it's one of the more popular channels now.
Well, design's always cool. I don't know about development, but
Yeah. Saving the link you shared though is specifically for Windows, like mixed reality, right?
Yeah, it's for the
So
HoloLens.
like to Susie's point, if you're gonna do iOS AR versus Google or Android's AR Core, those are probably going to be designed similarly.
mhm.
Okay, Cassie just came in and interrupted me and said our governor is a saint because they relaxed the liquor laws in Nebraska. You can now get liquor to go from a bar.
That's amazing.
They probably had to because so many of the bars in Nebraska were shutting down because they literally couldn't afford to keep open. Sorry, side note, my bad.
One way to think about the question that you asked, Sabian, is also thinking of designers and developers as users as well. Like something like this, these guidelines are intended for developers and designers to be the primary set of users for this ecosystem. So it's almost like a design system within design, like it's designception. Like a designer might be looking at this to base their design system and documentation off of, but or build their product off of, but this was created with them in mind too.
Got it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good point.
yeah, productception is a weird concept, but
Anyways, next topic. Do we have anything else on documenting while we're on it?
No, I think we covered a lot from the design side of it. At least I don't know, Susie. What do you think?
I think we covered everything I have.
Okay. Next is a more developer focused topic. It's about APIs. For those of you who are unaware what they are, I'm going to tell you what the acronym stands for, and it's going to mean absolutely nothing to you. It's an application programming interface. I give up, Cassie. I can't open that. So what that means to me as a developer, without like looking up a definition or anything, means there's some sort of database or something that I want to get the data out of, and this is kind of my interface between me making my own application and their database. So let's say, for example, I'm making an application about, I don't know, Pokemon. There's going to be a database out there with Pokemon, and you say, let me get all the Pokemon who are colored green. And then you use the API and say, I go to pokemon.com/Pokemon, and then you put in the query parameter for the color, right? So where that's useful is just about any networked application, you're going to need to either have an API that you build into your application. So, for example, in the oneleif website, we have an API that you could, man, I got the burps, that you can log in, register, make a post, delete a post, all that type of stuff. And basically making like some sort of standardized API or interface that people can reach into and say, here's what I can send you, and here's what you're going to send me back for that thing. This is going to be a development concept that's necessary for just about any developer, unless you're, I don't know, working on like embedded systems, I guess. Anything you want to add before I kind of show them examples of APIs, Zach? Johnny?
No.
Okay. So some examples that we wanted to give you guys are APIs for games that Zach and I like. And the reason we're doing this is because looking at normal APIs can be kind of, I don't want to say boring, but boring. So in order to get some practice with APIs, a great way would be to take your favorite video game. For me, that would be League of Legends, and for Zach, that would be Guild Wars 2. And most larger games or those that are esports have some form of API. So, for example, you can open up the Guild Wars 2 API and the League of Legends API. So what these allow you to do is, first you have to, for almost any API you hit, you have to have some sort of key, right? And the reasoning for that is their API is set up on some server so that when you make a request to them, that costs some of their resources, right? It costs either electricity or processing power or memory, right? Or all of the above. So you having an API key, you register yourself as a registered developer that is making some sort of API-based application with Guild Wars or with League of Legends, and using that, they can track the traffic used through your API key, right? So let's say I make an application that is absolutely massive, and everybody uses it for League of Legends to, I don't know, track their players' progress in like ranking up or whatever. Well, if it's getting 1 million hits a day, the League of Legends API owners are going to say, okay, you're using thousands of dollars worth of our resources. We're either going to charge you for that, or give you some sort of sponsorship because you're driving so much traffic to us. Some way to just at the very least monitor traffic and require authentication so it can't be like DDoSed or something like that. So once you have your sort of authentication, like normally you do, if I go back to Visual Studio Code, just to give an example, we go to, I'm not saying this is how it works at all in this case, but you can go to gw2api.com/ and then usually they have some sort of version, so like v1, v2, or whatever. And then you go to the endpoint that you want to hit. So we can go to, I don't know, accounts. And then you'd pass in with query parameters and a URL and say, my API key is some hash that they made. There's not going to be semicolons in it. And I want to get the account with the name Sabian. Let me add some spacing here because that's kind of hard to read. So this is how your normal API request is going to work. So what Zach and I wanted to bring up here was that if you want to get good experience with how client-server interactions work, this is a great way for you to test it because A, you're interested in whatever game you're making an API for. B, you can make a tool that's actually useful. And C, this is going to give you a great experience into client-server interactions, because what you're going to do is you're going to send a request in this format with some sort of headers or whatnot, and it's going to give you some sort of response, which is just how any other website in the world works. It's even how a lot of interactions with game networking works. Not necessarily with HTTP, but we can talk about that another time. So, I feel like I'm talking really fast and going over a lot. Do you guys want to slow me down and hit on anything that I haven't so far?
Yeah. Why don't you go to the well, let's check out one of the Guild Wars 2 APIs, or a client that consumes the Guild Wars 2 API, and show an example. Can you go to Guild Wars 2
Yeah, this is a great
efficiency.com?
one.
So I'd like to show this, show an example of a client using a public API, and then we can check out the actual documentation of the API for Guild Wars 2.
So you can go to the trading post. You have to be logged in. Nope. We'll go to account. Hold on. I'll open up. It looks like you require to have an account for this. I don't have an account set up.
I can show you my account. Let me just log in quick.
I can open up the League of Legends client if you want.
Oh yeah, no, just show off something that
Yeah.
shows that.
So this client is called Mobalytics. MOBA meaning a massive online battle arena. League of Legends is what it's for. So what they can reach into is they have a live companion that will basically show you all the champions on each team. It has statistics on them, so it'll say like they main this role. On average, here's their win rate. Here's their rank, the abilities they're using, the character they've picked. It'll keep track of your profile. Don't hate on me because I'm silver. So like it'll keep track of my progress and my rank, and then it has this cool thing called GPI, which is like Game Player Index or something, and it goes through all of my games and it says, okay, here's your win-loss percentage, here's your kills, deaths, and assists, here's every second that you killed a minion, here's why you died. So like it gives me like a nice little graph saying you're really good at fighting, consistency, and aggression, but you could use some work on vision, survivability, and farming, for example. And the way they get all this data is they reach into League of Legends API. They say, okay, let's get all the data for ranked games, and we're going to get those data for this player. And now we have all that data. And now what we do is we throw that into our database, add some transformations to it, and then make a UI to explain what this data means to the player, and then track the progress over time.
Holy heck!
You've never seen this before, have you?
I've never. No, this is.
I just found out about it like a month ago, and it's absolutely amazing. It has upped my playing quite well.
Like I had no idea you could even do all of this.
Yeah, the League of Legends API, I'm still waiting to get approval to use the API because they're actually pretty strict about it. But they have a whole Discord server for using their API, and like everybody is super helpful in there.
Very interesting.
So yeah, I'm gonna try and make something kind of like this and see what I can do. Go with it. But Zach made a Guild Wars 2 API as well. So basically, what we're trying to get at here is similar to our daily progress. You don't have to go do some boring HTML, CSS, JavaScript website. I don't want to call that boring. You don't have to go do some basic thing. You can think outside the box here. Like this is still a viable application. If you go into a job interview and you say, I made a Guild Wars 2 API wrapper, and somebody says, oh, what does that mean? And you're sitting there talking about it, excited, passionate, that's going to show volumes more of potential for candidacy for the position than, oh, I made this CRUD application that does this thing because my teacher said it would be a good idea to do. That was the main point I wanted to get out of this, as well as a little bit of an explanation of how these APIs work. Any other inputs here, guys? Other than Fardine having his mind blown?
Well, I do have a point that's geared towards developers. It's more so for people that aren't well versed with programming. But if you are, let's say, a product manager who isn't very or who doesn't have that much programming knowledge or experience, or let's say you're a designer, or just anyone looking to go into the world of APIs, Segment is actually a very good tool that handles a lot of the um, development side to kind of give you quick and easy integrations into different services and platforms. So you can unify all your data in one spot and work with different platforms all at once.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know the full scope of the product because I've only ever used them very sparingly. A lot of it seems to be very geared towards user interaction with with uh, a lot of like purchasing services and so on and so forth. But it's a really cool resource and a really cool platform for anyone who wants to learn how to use these, but doesn't have the time or experience to put into going with the programming route.
That's an awesome idea. I can see that being really useful for people who are like, oh, I want to set up a Shopify site because I don't know, I'm making stuff on Etsy and I want to have my own site or something. And that would be a really good
Mm-hmm.
service for them to not have to be a developer.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's just a side note.
Zach, Johnny, anything else I missed on APIs?
It might be worth calling out kind of, you touched on this briefly, but the importance of an API as a contract. And in addition to that, if you're making breaking changes to an API, talking a little bit about versioning, kind of
Yeah.
what that means.
So, okay, let's take for example, I did this at work today actually. We're using an API for a document signing applicate thing. So like, you go on, you add your signature, and then it'll like paste it in other places, right? And then it'll have some sort of vault to keep track of these, so you can have them in contracts or whatever. Well, the API that we're using, um, doesn't they used to do like username, password, and whatever organization you're a part of. Well, we grouped everybody under our organization, so we were responsible for everybody's traffic. Well, they changed it so like now you have an API key instead of a password, which broke the capabilities of the previous versions, right? So if let's say you're working on a $10 million or some, I don't even want to give it a dollar value, some massive application, and all of a sudden the API that you're using or some third-party integration says, you know what, we're just going to change how the base of this thing works. You could be really screwed if you don't have the development effort on hand to go implement those changes. Did I? Does that cover everything you were hitting at there, Johnny? I feel like I
Yeah.
forgot the question. Alrighty, so the last thing that we're going to talk about was Swift UI, because I believe Cosmin had the question. I don't know, I could be misremembering names. Or it was Ria. Sorry. So Ria. So I want to give you some background before we just hop into Swift UI. Ria basically said, I want to. Hold on, sorry, I'm gonna go find the question. I want to make an app, right? Yeah, okay, so he basically said, I want to build a working prototype of an app with a handful of screens, but I don't want to, Ria's a designer, but he wants to make, a working prototype to kind of get the idea across better than, like a mock-up of the designs. Um, so Zach made the idea that if you just want it on one device, you're not too worried about anything else. If you just want a prototype, Swift UI would be a really, really good way to go about it because um, commonly, this is notorious throughout many different facets of programming, but UI code is messy. UI code is not fun to work with. It's very hard to debug, and it's very hard to keep not only maintainable but readable. And I think from what experience I've had in different UI frameworks, Swift UI, Apple's latest rework of how you can make UI code in iOS, did a really good job of making it really simple for you to make UI code. So if I just pull up I believe I had an example here. If I just pull up a quick example, you can see, let me zoom in here. You have some view, you add a list to it, you add an image to that list, and then some sort of vertical stack in that list, and then you add text inside those vertical stacks. Super simple, right? So like this very simple code on the left-hand side makes this list on the right-hand side. Obviously, like passing the data into it and whatnot would be a little bit more complicated, but this code is just for the UI itself. We're not worried about passing in the data. Normally, to make this type of thing, you could make like each one of these things would be like a card, right? You could make a component for the card that would hold an image, a title, and a subtitle, and then you'd instantiate each one of these individually. Um, while you could still do that, it's much easier to do it with the new approach that they have, which uses in a stream a couple of months ago we talked about DSLs or domain specific languages. Well, Swift UI. This is not the normal syntax of Swift. This is their domain specific language for making UI. So the beauty of it is that it still uses under the hood Swift, which is what people use for iOS. I don't want to say people, that's generic. It's what Apple developers use, um, mainly for iOS, I guess. And this is basically like a layer of sugar on top of the syntax of that language that allows you to much more easily make UI and have the code much more clean and readable. I don't really have an example on hand of ugly versus pretty code side by side. Zach, do you have one pulled up that would be useful to show this off?
Like examples of good versus bad, or like examples of just Swift UI.
Examples of Swift UI versus the old way of doing things called UI Kit.
I don't have any personal examples. The only
Let's see if I
example
can
I
find one.
have is the Swift UI Kit article where I show like how you normally create a button and how mine does it. But I mean, that's the closest that I have on hand of that. You'd have to do a Google search to find old UI Kit versus Swift UI.
Oh, here. This is a good example. Just 1 second. Sorry, I needed a drink. So this makes it look like it's making a view controller that's holding a username and a password. It has a reference to some storyboard, which would be like a board with all your UI on it. And then it has a function to control what happens when it loads. And then down here it has even more functions to initialize the text fields, call what happens when you hit the button to log in, sign up, and reset the password. And it would look like apparently this. So then with Swift UI, let's scroll down. Oh, look, now you can actually declaratively lay out the exact fields, the color of the fields, all in one specific file, and then just pass the data in and it can handle it for you. While the code looks about the same length, I would personally, without being, a full-time iOS developer, I can instantly understand what in the world's going on here, right? I have some sort of scroll view, so I can scroll up and down. It's wrapped in a VStack, so everything's going to be vertical, right? So our scroll view is going to be vertical. I have an image up at the top. You can see the sunset. I have a spacer in between the image and whatever's going to be coming next. Then I have another vertical stack that's holding, looks like the email address, the input field for that, the password, and so on, right? This is miles upon miles of an improvement of readability. And if it's more readable, I would have to assume that it's more easily writable, because it just makes more intuitive sense. So to get back to Ria's point, like if you were to want to make a quick prototype, you should use this because A, it's the brand new thing that Apple's trying to promote, so it means they're going to be implementing all sorts of new cool features to make it easier to use. And B, if you're going to hand this off to a developer when you're done, they can pick it up and keep working with it, right? They won't have to read through some obscure code and figure out what in the world they're doing because you're not a developer. You don't know the clean code stuff that we were talking about at the beginning of this stream. And yeah, that's my main point on this. We gonna sit in silence here? I got nothing else, gentlemen.
Can you go through the Swift UI Kit article that I
Yeah.
have that kind of shows off
I think it's
the
in the other.
positioning with VStacks and HStacks? Kind of give Raya a better understanding of how to position things, or
Yeah.
kind of diving in. Regardless if you do use UI Kit versus Swift UI, you'll be using stack views.
So you can see Zach made this article on Medium. So let's start out with example 1, embedding a view. A view is this is a container of things that can be inside of it. So a view could hold a bunch of buttons, it could hold a scroll view, or a scroll view would be an example of a view, I guess. So yeah, a view is just a container, right? So you can see the blue background would be like the safe area, or basically what the iPhone is capable of displaying, and then the green box would be a view that he put inside of that, right? So you can see his code simply says view, and then we're going to embed a view inside of it, and then we're going to embed a view that's blue with padding, and then we're going to embed a view that embed a view that's green without padding. So you can see that there's 16 pixels of padding between the blue and the green, right? And then if you want to make a stack view, stack meaning they stack either vertically or horizontally multiple views, and you can see all he does is he embeds a view in the main one. He creates the background blue view. He creates a vertical stack that has spacing in between each of the children, and then he has 3 green children. And look how easy that farting is. That readable to you as a designer? Obviously the syntax is a little funky, obviously.
Well, I'm a couple of seconds
Oh,
behind.
sorry, my bad. Yeah, I forget I'm ahead of you guys.
Yeah, it's just refreshing. Yeah, that's readable.
So I'm not gonna state that. Yeah, you can throw designers in the mud and have them go make views. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, um, from less experienced eyes, it's more easier to hop on a project like this, which is really useful when you're working on a team. So then you get to things like websites and whatnot, where the views can get super complex. So, for example, Zach here, I assume this is going to be a horizontal view up top, and then that's going to hold a vertical view on the right side, and then that's all wrapped in a vertical view. And at the innermost, we have a vertical one wrapped in a horizontal, wrapped in a vertical, wrapped in a view itself. I'm not going to spend too much time on that because that's a brain melter. And then he walks through the actual steps to get this started, right? So you can see how little code it was to get these views up and running. So now what you could do is inside of these views, you could just put a text or an image or a button or whatever you want. And the syntax is super easy to declare and get it started. And oh, you accidentally put this view on top of this view. Oh, you don't have to like go reorganize it in the storyboard and drag and drop stuff. No, you just copy the code up here and paste it below the other one. Did I hit on what you were hoping me to hit on there, Zach?
Yeah, kind of just touching on the thing of embedding a view inside of a view, and vertical stacks, horizontal stacks, and then there is the thing such as a Z stack, which you can stack things on top of each other. And those are kind of just the fundamentals of this little framework that I made. But then also, yeah, Swift UI and how views work with views inside of Swift UI.
Well, I believe that's all the topics we have. Any other chit chatty stuff while we're here?
Yeah, I actually have something that might be worthwhile for people looking for more projects or experience. So with the current climate, a lot of physical events are being canceled all around the world, as they should be. In the case of hackathons, which I think was touched upon in the last stream, um, a lot of them have shifted to a digital format. So the benefit of that is now you no longer have to physically be present on the other side of the world to go to a hackathon. Now you can participate in a hackathon happening in Australia or Southeast Asia or somewhere in the States, from wherever you are, because now it's being facilitated online instead of being physical. So that being said, I think there's currently 4 that are listed in North America, at least under the MLH website, which was shared last time. I'm going to post this again on the resources section. But for anyone looking to have that project development environment and work towards something in a very fast paced process, or heck, even putting together a OneLeaf team potentially and getting some of the OneLeaf members to participate, with the whole self isolation quarantine to give something to do to folks. Check out the site and look at some of the competitions. Deadlines are soon since they just recently shifted to digital and they're still trying to be accommodating for people who want to apply and participate. But yeah, a couple of them are closing up by tomorrow or the day after. Um, so that's just a little note I wanted to make.
You know what's funny? There's a game jam out there called Sequesta Jam, and you have 14 days to make a game about social distance, and they released it with the advent of the coronavirus isolation,
Huh.
which is
Yeah,
which is
no,
kind of funny.
there's a lot of cool stuff. Uh, well, given the unfortunate nature of everything happening, there's a lot of cool stuff coming out of it in terms of project ideas and concepts. Like if you look at Dribble, a lot of the front page is around um, the current climate, and you even have like people making animations about toilet paper.
The first thing is toilet paper.
Yeah, like it's really cool to see people turn the um, people turn the situation into positivity and project inspiration.
And so I think while a lot of careers are taking a hit, like any manual labor or bars or any social type things are gonna be taking a hit. The software world really isn't taking a whole lot of hits. Maybe freelancers will be seeing more of a hit to their income, unless they're already locked into a contract and whatnot. On the upside, this is a great time for developers to be learning. Not only because you're stuck at home and you have to learn it, or you have nothing else to do anyways, but the world is learning a lot right now. Because okay, let's take for example, I have this off the top of my head because my fiance is a teacher. The education system in 2 weeks they had to basically turn the entire education system upside down and say, okay, we're going to take the entire system that you guys have known and now you're doing it at home, right? So not only do people like software developers have to learn how to do everything over email or Slack or like Zoom meetings and whatnot, but the whole world is having to learn how to utilize this technology that's been here for a long time, and there's a lot of possibilities coming up that people hadn't thought of before because there wasn't a need for it.
Hmm. Even things like telehealth and
Yeah.
there's a lot of shifts to that remote environment for sure.
Will said he'd be so down for a hackathon. Are we just gonna do a hackathon on the OneLeaf website?
Well, I'm already behind, so I have to catch up first the rest of the team and make sure that I'm updated just to even participate in whatever hackathon happens if it does happen. But yeah, no, it'd be really cool to have internal community hackathons too. Collaboration is great, but I feel like sometimes competitive zeal is also very fun to tap into.
Yeah, it'd be cool. I don't know. Like maybe we all pick an API, and whoever can make the coolest application wins. I don't know, a free OneLeaf T-shirt or something.
Or just bragging rights too.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. I guess you don't have to win something. Bragging rights is
yeah,
plenty. And then we can give out a role that says OneLeaf Hackathon 2020 winner.
or yeah, like API master or something. I don't know.
API master, I like that. Um, yeah,
But yeah,
that's
no,
kind of all I got.
I'd be down to uh, participate for uh, for one of these if we can put together a team.
Yeah, me too. Actually, I'd love to do a game jam during this time. I don't know. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the stream here because we're kind of out of topics. We can keep chit chatting after.